Let us now start with the various parts of the human eye, and we will even study the functions simultaneously. So the very first part that we are studying is the cornea. Now cornea is the outermost covering which is transparent and very thin also, that is present over the eyeball. So throughout the eyeball you can see that there is a thin and transparent cover or a membrane which is the cornea. Now the curvature, if you see, it is very smooth. There are no ups and downs or irregularities that are there in the cornea. So the main function of the cornea is to bring about the refraction of light. So light enters the eyes through the cornea. Maximum amount of light that is refracted is brought about by the cornea. So this is the very first part, and this is the function of cornea. The next part comes in, that is iris. We know that the color of the iris is different for different people, and mostly we see people with black or brown eyes in India, and it is a genetic characteristic. After the iris, we come across the next part, which is the pupil. This pupil is a small hole, and it can bring about change in its diameter, and it is present at the center of the iris. So what is the pupil? It's a small hole of changing diameter at the center of the iris. Now this pupil can bring about change in its size depending upon the amount of light that we are exposed to. So if we are exposed to too much light, the pupil becomes small, and if we are in dim light, the pupil becomes large, or it widens so that more light enters. So if the light falling on the pupil is too bright, then it contracts and it widens when the light is dim. This tendency of the pupil to adjust the opening for the amount of light that enters is called as adaptation. So this property of the pupil to allow only the light that is required for us to view the objects around us is called as adaptation. Now actually the opening of the pupil is under the control of the iris muscles. The muscles of the iris control the amount of the pupil that opens or becomes small. Now the muscles of the iris will stretch and reduce the size of the pupil when we are exposed to too much light, whereas the muscles of the iris relax to increase the size of the pupil. So it is the muscles of the iris that control the opening of the pupil. So muscles of iris stretch to reduce the size of the pupil, and they relax to increase the size of the pupil. After the pupil, we come across a biconvex crystalline lens. So this is the lens that is present here. You can see it is biconvex and it is crystalline. It is made out of proteinaceous material. The function of the lens is to bring about change in the focal length so that we can view objects at various distances from our eyes. So the main function of the lens is to bring about small adjustments in focal length to focus the image, and we can perceive the objects clearly that are very far from us and those which are even near to us. Now because it's a biconvex lens, we will be getting real and inverted image of the object on the screen that is there inside the eyes. And this screen is called as the retina. So here you can see retina, which is a light sensitive screen that is present where the image is going to be obtained. So here we have the lens, biconvex lens, and since it is biconvex, it is going to give you a real and inverted image of the object on the retina. Now let us talk about the one of the most important parts of the eye, that is retina. The retina is made out of light sensitive cells. Now that is why we cannot see in dark, because these cells which make up the retina are light sensitive. They will get excited or they get activated only when light falls on them, and hence we cannot see anything in dark. So it comprises of light sensitive cells, and whenever light falls onto them, they get activated and they give rise to an image on the retina. But this image that is formed on the retina is finally converted into an electric signal, and this electric signal is carried by the optic nerve to the brain. The brain interprets the object using the stored memory, and we can see the object as it is. We do not perceive objects to be inverted. We see them to be erect, straight, as they are, and not upside down or inverted. And that is on account of uh, the property of the brain, that interpretation which is brought about by the brain, that we see the objects as they are. So once the image is formed on the retina, it is converted into a electric signal, and these signals are conveyed to the brain via the optic nerve. Later, brain analyzes these signals and converts them in such a way that we perceive the objects as they actually are. Now here you can see one more labeling, optic disc. Now here you can see the optic disc. Optic disc is also called as blind spot. Now, as there are no photoreceptors, that is light sensitive cells that are present in the optic disc, there is no image detection in this area. So once the image is formed on retina, it is converted into a electric signal, and whatever image is formed here at the optic disc or blind spot is not seen because there are no photoreceptors or light sensitive cells in this area, and hence no image is formed over here. Finally, the optic nerve carries it to the brain and we perceive the objects as they are. Now the retina comprises of specialized cells, as we said, light sensitive cells, and these cells are of two types. One is called as rod cells and the other are called as cone cells. Now, just by the name, those which are rod shaped are called rod cells, and the cone cells have a cone like structure, and hence they are called as cone cells. The rod cells respond to intensity of light and give us information about brightness or dimness of the object to the brain. Now, how bright or how dim the objects are or the light is around us, so the perception regarding it is conveyed to the brain with the help of rod cells. Whereas the cone cells are responsible for the colored vision that we have. We can distinguish between various colors on account of the cone-like cells that are present, and those cells convey the information about the color of the object to the brain. And the brain processes all this information about the object, its color, its brightness or dimness, And finally, the actual image of the object is seen, or we see the object. So these are some important parts of the human eye. Let us quickly go through it. Once again, cornea, transparent bulge on the surface of the eyeball, main function being refraction of light. Eyeball, spherical in shape and diameter is about 2.4 centimeters. We have a lens that is crystalline, biconvex, and it provides fine adjustment to the focal length. Retina, light sensitive screen, light sensitive cells are present which get activated on illumination and generate electric signals. Retina is to eye what film is to the camera. So earlier we used to get cameras where we used a black colored film over which we would have the image of the object, and later on it was developed. So the function of the retina is same as the function of the film which is there inside a camera. So the image is going to be formed on the retina, just like a image is obtained on clicking a picture over the film. So I hope you have understood the various parts that are there in the human eye. Let's go on to the next slide.